So this is the album I'm going to be reviewing today for you guys. AC/DC's Back in Black album. The album came out in 1980. It was the first album to have Brian Johnson as their lead singer. When this album was originally being written, it was written with Bon Scott, the original singer for AC/DC, and then he passed away. And when he passed away, if I'm not mistaken, some of the writing that they used, or they wrote together with Scott and the rest of AC/DC, was used on this album. But when Brian Johnson got in the band, Angus and Malcolm wrote most of the music, and Brian Johnson handled the lyrics. So it's really cool because this is not just, oh, we got a new lead singer, but he doesn't do nothing but sing. He had a hand in writing part of this album, and that's what's really cool about it, and I think that's what makes him, a valuable aspect to the band. To get started with this album, I'm 24, and since I've been alive, all I've heard is how great this album is, and it's one of those albums you have to hear before you die, and just one of the greatest rock albums ever written and things like that. And I would definitely have to agree with that. I don't think there's anything bad about this album. I mean, so far, every time I listen to it, the only thing bad about it is that when it ends, really. Major hits off this album. You have Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, She Shook Me All Night Long, or just Shook Me All Night Long, actually. Back in Black. I mean, I can just keep going on. But every song on this album is great. Some of AC/DC's greatest riffs are on this album. I mean, at least for me, they're their greatest riffs. I would say that you could say that they're most popular for sure, because this album is pretty much their highest selling album, and I believe Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution is the highest song they've ever had, the highest charted song on the U.S. charts, if I'm not mistaken. But for me, I don't ever look at that. I look at the album itself, and I've listened to albums that haven't sold that much, that are underground albums, and they're great. This is different. When you first put this album, on the listen, the first track on it is Hell's Bells, which I think is the most appropriate, first track on an album ever, because there's that long, build up, then boom, it kicks in, and it's just an awesome song. And Hell's Bells is one of those songs that just grabs you, The intros, sometimes long intros like that can kind of be like, but the way they do it on this album is really great. They have that bell and everything, and then you hear the guitar kind of coming in, and then it kind of picks up, and then boom, both guitars hit you, and the rhythm section kicks in. And that's one big thing about this album, is that all the riffs on it, guitar-wise, are just perfect. So having perfect riffs and then having the rhythm section that AC/DC has makes this album just like pretty much every song you listen to just get pounded into your head. You pretty much remember every riff off this, everything off of it. I mean, to me, just the guitar alone, the tone of the guitar is enough to drive somebody crazy. I mean, that's one of those tones that you only get from cranking, expensive tube guitar amplifiers all the way up. And if you're not a guitarist or into music, you won't know that, or what that means, but it just basically means that in order to get that, they had to rock out, literally, to get that tone. And for me, I remember the first time, I heard these songs all growing up and stuff, and I remember the first time when I was a teenager and I plugged this album in, I was actually listening to a little bit heavier stuff like Metallica and everything, and those guys play a lot faster, and even if they're playing regular power chords, it sounds like a lot more. But still, when I plug this in, just that, two guitar, attack that they have, still freaked me out more than listening to the Metallica albums, where there's songs like Fade to Black from Metallica that's got like probably 8 guitars, layered on one track. And this just 2 guitars, blew me away, because it was so powerful. The way that Malcolm and Angus play is huge. They come up with these awesome chords, these awesome riffs, and they play them in such a way that it's just a continuous, like, almost like sledgehammer, kind of just hits you and knocks you out, kind of. And the drumming in AC/DC, it's always amazing. I call it like tribal drumming because, no, they're not coming in and playing 100 miles per hour, this and that, but they're playing these nice, just solid drum beats that are really rhythmically awesome and have a sound that's amazing on their own, but it just sounds like some kind of old tribal drums or something in my mind. It's just amazing. And, the first thing about this album is if you're somebody who has never heard AC/DC with Brian Johnson, but you have heard Bon Scott AC/DC, you'll be blown away because a lot of people say they sound the same. Do they sound similar in some senses and in some lines? Yeah, they do, but not all the way. I think there's still a big difference between them. I think that they both are great. Personally, I like Bon Scott's voice better. I think Brian Johnson, after a while, gets too, almost gimmicky. But still is an awesome vocalist. I'm not saying that, I couldn't listen to him. I mean, if he called me up tomorrow and wanted to start a band, I'd be like, hell yeah, his vocals are good, but I think Bon Scott has that factor that you could actually kind of use all the time. And, this album definitely, you could tell that there was somebody else writing the lyrics because they were still doing the same line, had a lot of the same stuff, but you could definitely tell that Brian Johnson had a little bit of a put into it because they just kind of had a different kind of feel than what Bon Scott did. And the album before this, the last album with Bon Scott was Highway to Hell, which is an amazing album, and in its own right is a huge album. I don't think it's nothing like Back in Black personally because for some songs, yeah, like Highway to Hell and stuff, are really great songs, but as a complete album, I don't think every track is as strong as Back in Black. But, if you listen to it and then you listen to this album, you can hear some similarities and stuff, but you can also hear them on top of their game. And, this album pretty much was done in the memory of Bon Scott. I mean, the album cover is all black, and AC/DC wanted it all black, but I think their record company or label at the time, said that they didn't want it, but they would allow them to do it if they made the AC/DC gray outlined, is I think what was going on with it, and apparently that's what happened because that's what the album covers are. But there's really not a lot to critique about this album. I'm doing a review of it, but at the same time, it's almost like I could just turn the camera on and say, this is one of the greatest albums ever, buy it. But there's not a lot to go over. I mean, you got these riffs that are rock and roll, just crunchy riffs. If you really listen to them, I mean, you can hear blues all over them. I mean, if you listen to Rock and Roll and Noise Pollution, I mean, it's a rock song and you get that and stuff, but it's honestly like listening to some kind of blues jam or something. I mean, it really is. But I just think that's another thing that makes Angus, really great because he's actually not doing nothing more than playing the blues, just in, a little bit of a different way, doing a little bit of tricks here and there. I mean, I think to me that Angus was one of those first guitarists to really use the distortion, not just to make chords a little bit crunchier and stuff, but use feedback from the amps and, take pull-offs and stuff like that to the next level with some of his stuff because of, technology progressing, amps getting more distortion and things like that. And I think he was one of the first people to really use that, and that's what gives him that really gritty style, when he slides into chords or anything like that. To me, it's just that was something that he was really one of the first people, I personally think, to really just use that and master that. And that's what gave him that gritty tone too. Even if he was doing something simple, there's that grit to it. And that's what it's from. Overall, 1 to 5, this album on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 all the way. Whether you're into rock or not, I mean, there's nobody I don't know who, when you turn one of the songs off on Black to Black, doesn't start, rocking out. Girls, guys, whatever, from a different country, anything. I mean, so many times there's jokes and shows about dancing to Back in Black from women when they worked in a strip club or something. I mean, it's just constantly everybody. If you're on a job site and Back to Black comes on, there can be guys talking about rap all day and stuff. Back in Black comes on, they like it. They'll tell you that's a good song, that's rock and roll. So, to me, if you write an album like that and you have songs like that, then you've accomplished something that there's people right now, and since the dawning of, I guess, making albums and stuff like that, music being able to be recorded, that's what people have tried to do. No matter what genre you're in or anything, at the end of the day, it's just about writing good music. AC/DC does that. So again, this is definitely a 5 out of 5. If you haven't ever heard this album, then man, you got to pick it up. You've either been living underneath a rock or you're really young. Because, I mean, I can remember growing up, and even when I first bought this album, I remember when I turned it on, it's like I already knew the songs just because you've heard them throughout your life. You know, whether you go to a football game or anything, these songs are just classics. But yeah, check it out. AC/DC Back in Black, 1980, one of the greatest albums ever.